Alright, today I'm going to go over how Doctor Lexi, it will be the official flight surgeon, and some of her small little responsibilities, and along with Liam, and how he is a pararescueman. So Doctor Lexi, aka Natalie Dormer from Game of Thrones and a few other cool shows, is going to be our doctor on the Tempest, not the Hyperion. And I want to make some differences on notes on how the doctor on the Tempest will be separate and how they're different from the Hyperion doctors. So she's going to be the doctor on the Tempest and not the doctor on the Hyperion, which they probably have a lot more, obviously. But she'll have at least 11 personnel to take care of, as far as we know from the Mass Effect wiki, or was the MassEffect.com site. But 11 personnel plus her, including our characters, plus possibly other minor NPCs that will be like the basic staff that you don't really talk to, but they're just kind of there. She's basically the flight surgeon for this small unit, and if she was in charge of the Hyperion, she'd have a larger role and a lot more needy role in being the flight surgeon, or I call it flight surgeon because that's what the Navy would call it. She's the doctor. You know, if she was military, she'd be an officer, not enlisted, so she'd be considered a surgeon or a doctor, not just medical basic staff, which I'll get to Liam in a second. I will note, aside from her, I believe Liam may be the enlisted medical personnel, but we'll get to that in a second. I believe she'll have an easier time, basically, on the Tempest, the smaller Normandy craft, than on the actual Hyperion. Hyperion, I don't know if all the personnel have been pulled out of their tubes yet, but it did note in the newest trailer that came out, I believe today, that you can actually choose to have science, military, or one of the other kinds of personnel you can pull out of their cryo tubes and basically use those personnel for your own reasons. Really cool. But so it seems like the Hyperion doesn't have all its full personnel out of their tubes. So maybe it might be easier on the Hyperion to be a doctor there, but if everyone's out of their tubes, she has a lot more personnel to take care of. And compared to the Tempest, where she has only a few. And the only real problems will be taking care of the imminent medical services. She'd pretty much be playing nurse and doctor, because it looks like she may be the only medical personnel on there. I did some stats checking, and it looks like a U.S. Navy carrier, the Hyperion, let's say, has about 5,000 personnel when it has the full wing on board. Usually 3, but 5,000, that's an extra 2,000 personnel when they have the full air wing on board. And I did the numbers, there's about 40 medical personnel, not including dentists. So screw the dentists, but the actual medical officers and enlisted personnel, about 40. That leaves 125 patients on average per medical personnel. That's a freaking lot. I remember being on a cruise ship, there was one doctor, and even get to him cost like $100-something, and here he has a slew of people to take care of. And so I'm just noting that, like, it might be a lot easier. She might be having an easier time, more adventurous, fun freaking time, as we'll find out, our doctor on the Tempest. And it'd be really cool to have a little bit of time talking to her, especially with Natalie Dormer's voice acting covering that character. That's wonderful. No critical analysis on her. I'm just waiting for that. I only had critical analysis on the last video they showed us. But anyways, whew. I'll note that if the Hyperion has 20,000, which I was noting as the carrier, you know, for the human population, it actually has 20,000. 20,000 personnel, whether they're in cryo or not. And I did the numbers, I just carried over everything times 4, right? Basically, 5,000 to 20,000. 20,000 personnel, or people, civilians and military. You'd average out, you'd need probably 160, actually on average, 160 medical personnel to keep the 125 patients on average. You probably want more being on a new climate. If you're going to go to the new world, you're going to need a lot of medical and military personnel, and so I would assume they probably have, if not 160, probably 200 at least medical personnel. They're going to need a lot of doctors and medical. But I don't know if they're accounting for all of them. If you know about military work, you talk about medical personnel just being the nurses and the EMS staff on base, or on your forward operating base, or at your civilian base. You have the doctors, your enlisted personnel, and everyone in between. But I don't think those numbers account for the enlisted forward operating medical personnel, which I'll get to, which I believe Liam, like Cooper from Event Horizon, was like a crisis or rescue tech in that freaking movie. It was awesome. I love Event Horizon. Classic, crazy, over the top, no spoilers. But Cooper, he was the rescue operator, and I believe, just like Liam here, he is reminiscent of what we now would call the pararescuemen. They call Liam the crisis specialist, which sounds kind of generic. I don't know if, crisis specialist being medical, crisis specialist being, a shooter. But he was pulled from law enforcement and engineering and going to school to actually be on the squad. I think you choose him, or he's already chosen as a team member before we even start this whole story. It looks like he has some medical in the background. And I'm going to point out that if you know about pararescuemen, they're Air Force combat medical specialists. I believe this guy, really cool, is like reminiscent of that. It's wonderful, one of the best unknown jobs in the United States military, let alone the Air Force. It's the best job. Those guys are the best people ever. The motto is that others may live. And if you've never heard that before, just look them up. Really amazing. Quick little note, the mission of a pararescueman is to rescue aircrew members in austere and non-permissive environments. So basically it sounds like the crisis specialist, Liam. I believe we have him to be our medical and security dude. Pararescuemen jump behind enemy lines or work on the front lines and pick up downed crew members or military personnel, basically they're downed, whether they're pilots or they're just regular foot soldiers or ground pounders. They pick them up and take them back to base, and they're basically badass medics. Like if you see EMS coming up, rolling up, picking up people in a little paramedic van, they're basically those guys with freaking M16s and M4s, sorry. So yeah, they're badass. I hope Liam is reminiscent of this. I hope they note that they really dive into what the crisis specialist is, because that's really vague. And if you know Cooper from from Event Horizon, he's a cool character, and he was basically like a medical tech, medical rescue officer. So that was notable. And rescue officers nowadays, if they're officer in rank, not enlisted, those are called crows in terms of pararescuemen. The pararescuemen officers are called combat rescue officers. They're different from enlisted pararescuemen, which makes the mass majority of those pararescuemen roster. There's a smaller number of the officer pararescuemen, the crows. They're the ones that actually rescue the astronauts when they drop in and land and escape, basically, on the water. When they have to pull them out of their little pods. I forgot what they're called, but they're landing pods. There's like 2 crows that come down and like rescue them. It's really badass, and it's another little branch, little piece snippet of the pararescueman force. And so it's really wonderful to see these characters kind of different, and I like where they're going with this game. There's some critical things I had to say before, but it's only been so few. Obviously, I'm going to look at this contextually, and I hope they don't ruin Natalie Dormer's character. She seems like, being the flight surgeon, the new Dr. Chocolates, this can go really well. And having the crisis specialist, Liam, be like our little policeman, medical dude, pararescueman guy, I think that'd be really wonderful to have him around. I want to learn about these characters a lot more than I did want to learn about PD. But we'll see. Thanks for listening, and y'all have a wonderful day.